Hey everybody, welcome to episode 19 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. Let's get into the show.
I have an issue with my 08 GTI. It was running okay when I pushed it real hard in acceleration once. I got a check engine that turned out to be cylinder misfires, replaced all 4 coil packs with AutoZone units. Engine ran even worse. Put the original VW coils back. Since then, no misfires, but the engine has a bad hesitation about 2500 RPM under hard acceleration. Above or below that, taking it easy, it's fine. I'm thinking I need a set of good coils. Opinion, please?
Okay, Bill. So installing coils on a vehicle, from my experience, a lot of the coils you'll find at a lot of the aftermarket stores like that are generally low quality, or maybe more importantly, instead of saying they're low quality, they just don't run well in most Volkswagen and Audi engines. That also rings true for some of the cheaper plugs that you'll find out there in the market. Any plug that's probably cheaper than $6 or $7 a plug is pretty much guaranteed to run like garbage in any Volkswagen Audi engine. You want to get top tier quality plugs, Bosch, NGK, or the original manufacturer, which is usually one of those two. Definitely, I would start by putting known good OEM coils and plugs in there, and then going from there. That should at least help with your hesitation issue, or at least lead you to a path to help you diagnose that problem.
Last 2 times I got gas, I left it running because it's hard to start sometimes after getting gas. It seems like it was getting a little loud and always shaking a little bit. Could this be from the gas cap off and air getting in there? What do you think?
So this particular issue sounds like it's related to the N80 valve, or Evap Purge valve. And what the Evap system does is it verifies that the fuel tank of the vehicle is sealed properly. So what it does is it will pressurize the system and test it. So what probably is happening, your Evap Purge valve is clogged with a bunch of carbon, and it sent carbon from the charcoal canister into the Evap Purge valve. It's now stuck open. So what's happening is, while your engine is running, there's pulling vacuum through there, and while you're filling up your fuel tank, it's sucking gas into the engine that is not intended to be running there. So that's probably your issue. Start by replacing your N80 valve. That's probably could be related to your extended crank problem too, but you may want to look at some other things. I think this was a 2.5 engine, and if you're having extended crank problems, you might want to look at the crank sensor, or at least scan for faults to see if you have anything associated with a crank sensor, because that does sometimes cause extended crank on 2.5 engines.
For those that have had their clutch replaced, let's discuss this topic. I'm starting to believe more and more that it's not the clutch disc that is the problem, at least in some of the cases. Paul, I would assume you still have my old hardware that came out of the car. If you do, could you please look at it and tell me your thoughts? It seems like the flywheels on the car are the weak link and tend to fail. I have now heard from a couple different people that went to the dealer and had their car inspected, and the dealer stated their clutch was bad, but after taking the car elsewhere, it turned out that the flywheel was a problem and not the clutch disc. Has anyone else experienced this? Also, why would the flywheel fail in such a new car before the clutch disc? Of course, this is not always the case, but I've seen it times when I don't want to bring it to some attention. Reason is, if someone goes out and gets the upgraded clutch disc and keeps a stock flywheel, they might find out that they're now screwed because their flywheel is bad and they need new.
So Naynad, we do still have your clutch assembly and flywheel. We haven't done anything with it yet because of dual mass. We've been intending to make a video talking about dual mass and how they work and everything else, but we just haven't gotten around to it yet. So to answer the main theme of the question is the dual mass flywheel the weak point of this system? And the general answer is going to be yes, but the main point for me is that most people involved with this group, they drive their car super hard. So if you're launching and granny shifting, not double clutching like you should, or if you're doing highway pulls, that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize. Highway pulls put a lot of stress on the clutch assembly, which is something that is not really intuitive, but they're really hard on the system. Now, driving like that is obviously not intended how a factory vehicle was intended to be used. But even more importantly than that, most people in this group are stage 2, which is roughly like 130 horsepower and around the same amount of torque, more than the factory intended amount of power. So if you're talking about adding 60% power, when that vehicle was engineered and that more importantly, the clutch and flywheel assembly was engineered, it wasn't intended to withstand a huge increase in power like that. So is it the weak point? Maybe yes, but more importantly, none of this stuff's going to hold up when you add that much power to any engine. And so definitely you should never just do a disc slap and a pressure plate. You should do flywheel, disc, and pressure plate all together, because they're going to be able to hold the clamping force required. For anybody who's not familiar, when you have a dual mass flywheel, basically it's two different pieces. Obviously that's where the dual mass comes from, and the rear piece mounts the engine, the front piece is a friction surface for the clutch, and what happens is in between there's a material that basically dampens as the clutch engages. So basically as the clutch is starting to engage, it starts to clamp and allows some flex in it. Well, when you beat that real hard, it destroys that friction material. So a lot of times, by the time, people who are really hard on their cars or have a lot more power, by the time you take it out, there'll be a lot of play back and forth, because all that friction material is just beat to death, and there's nothing left of it, or there's very little left and it's not doing its job properly anymore. So anybody who has any significant amount of upgrades or power, especially if you drive the car hard, you should definitely keep in mind that at some point you're going to have to upgrade your clutch, because it probably will not hold up. We'll put a link to a lot of the options we have as far as upgraded clutches for anybody who's looking for some options.
Hi guys, I have a 2006 Jetta FSI engine with 117,000 miles on it, and I have an issue with the P0171 code, System 2 Lean, for a few months already. Nobody can find where the problem is, can't see any broken vacuum hoses. I took it to the VW dealer here in Illinois, and they replaced the turbo hose below the engine because there was a small oil leak, and they told me that was it. However, they charged me $550 for that. After 20-something miles, the check engine light came back on again, throwing the same code. Took it back 3 times, and they say they don't know what the problem is with the car. I was thinking about the N80 valve. Can you guys please help me at least with some good advice? I would appreciate it. Thanks in advance.
So FSI, the System 2 Lean leans towards a vacuum leak. It could be something else like a mass airflow sensor, but it's more likely a vacuum leak of some kind. So the most common vacuum leak on FSI engines is the coolant flange assembly. It actually has a vacuum pipe that runs through it. Sometimes that will crack because there's another brake booster pipe that runs from the intake manifold down to that, and it will crack a lot of times. So sometimes it's the hose assembly that runs to the coolant flange. Sometimes the coolant flange itself has a crack in it, causing a small vacuum leak because the vacuum actually passes through the flange itself. Now, if it's not that, yes, it could be an N80 valve. If it's stuck open, it could cause a vacuum leak. Seems less likely, but possible still. And also, PCV valves can cause vacuum leaks, and if you want to make sure you're using a quality PCV valve to replace your original one, because there's a lot of different PCV valves. It's really important to know you're getting the correct one for the car, because there's 2 different ones on FSI cars, and if you put the wrong one in the car, it can run poorly. So if none of those things are your issue, and really you'll have to track down and figure out which, if any of them are, but if none of them are, you're probably going to need to get it smoke tested to try to determine exactly what's going on. So if you're not familiar with smoke testing, basically what they do is they pump smoke into the vacuum system of the car and pressurize it, and then you should obviously see wherever the smoke comes out, that's where you know you have your leak coming from. But that's definitely the best way to solve that problem. Thank you for watching episode 19 of the AskDAP show. If you want your questions answered, shoot us an email, info@shopdap.com.